Chapter 20. Billion-dollar venture. Tongue of an angel. Most people yearn to contribute, make the world a better place and have success. All at the same time. Make sure to give your business a background, a mission and a story. Blake Mycoskie. That Tony Pizarro would someday own and manage a billion-dollar enterprise was the farthest thing in the minds of those who knew him when he was growing up poor and orphaned in Barangay Dangbailolo, Orion, Bataan. In 2005, Tony achieved exactly that success, defying the expectations of many. Although he only finished his high school education, could hardly speak the English language and was so naive when he entered the U.S. Navy. He was scared and afraid to be near a phone, because it might ring and he would be obligated to answer it. He thought the tall buildings in America were all churches, and instinctively made a sign of the cross whenever he passed by them. He believed he was seeing a miracle whenever a television set would turn on by itself, unaware that it was switched on by remote control. But he was able to quickly adapt to his new environment by watching others do things and following their example. He studied and worked hard, taking advantage of career opportunities offered by the Navy. Each time he saw free courses and training opportunities, he would take them, knowing they would help elevate his position someday. In due time, he became an expert in his job, was appreciated and promoted through the ranks by his superiors. After 30 years, the little orphan boy had amassed a multi-million-dollar fortune, managed a billion-dollar enterprise, and was even giving away part of his fortune to help the less privileged people in the world. While still with the Navy, Tony already knew exactly what he was going to do when he retired. When he retired in 1989, Ronald Reagan was elected 45 sup or equals X/Sup President of the United States. His priority was to cut taxes, increase defense spending and reduce nuclear arms. All this did not happen overnight. As he revamped the U.S. Armed Forces to be the best in the world, he opened up all contracting businesses and offered them to civilian contractors. To reduce spending, he took out military assignments, placing all warehousing jobs in the hands of civilians. The timing could never have been better for Tony's idea of establishing his own company, which he would name after his children, in response to the administration's cost-cutting initiatives. As these policies were implemented, he saw private contractors providing mess hall services to the Navy facilities and knew that he could do a better job. They provided personnel like waiters, line servers, storeroom clerks, and dishwashers of plates, cleaning utensils, tables, pots and pans. While cooking was still done by the Navy, the contractors hired ensured that people were fed properly. To learn more about the business, he sought to study the details of the operations of a similar company. He had to execute his plan flawlessly, which meant that he first had to gain first-hand knowledge of all the government requirements for his business startup to operate. The opportunity came in the summer of 1990 during a wedding reception of a friend, when he met the owner of a company that did catering for the Navy. When the owner found out he was looking for a job, she hired Tony on the spot, aware of his qualifications and expertise. She appointed him as project manager at the dining facilities of the U.S. Naval Station on 32 sup or equals X/ND/Sup Street, San Diego. Tony looked at her company operation and introduced changes to improve its systems like employee scheduling. It made the owner happy because his ideas increased profits. Due to his superb performance, he was promoted to the position of Director of Operations of all her contracts at her main office in Del Mar, California in just a few months' time. Naturally, I demanded a hefty increase, which I got. I noticed they were wasting a lot of man-hours that otherwise could be in her profit margins, he said. He trimmed the man-hours wasted, shuffled his crew and reduced expenses. I turned the savings into additional profit. Because of me, the company won more contracts. I was sent to Hawaii in 1991 where we won 11 more contracts and I helped set up their operations. When Tony returned to San Diego, California, he found out that an old friend, with same expertise in Navy catering, Jerry Lopez, not his real name, was back in town selling cars in one of the car dealerships in the Kearny Mesa area. Tony was now ready to execute his business plan and launch his own company. He sought to introduce Lopez to the company's owner as his replacement to manage the projects in Honolulu, Hawaii. A year later, in early 1991, when Tony thought he was ready to strike out on his own, he tendered his resignation. The owner didn't want him to resign. She was crying, even blocking her office door to prevent Tony from getting out of the building. His distraught employer even offered to double Tony's salary. But nothing could stop Tony. He was eager to depart, convinced it was time for him to test his wings. He then looked at his list of prospective business partners as he knew he could not do it on his own. He needed the right people with the best expertise and connections. His first choice was Jerry Lopez, the same guy he referred to as old boss to manage that contractor's operations in Hawaii. By then, Lopez, a retired Filipino U.S. Navy commander, who had experience as a supply corps officer, had also quit the company. Tony first met him at the meetings of the Filipino-American Military Officers Association of San Diego County, FAMOS. But when Tony asked around, he was told Lopez had divorced his wife, married a younger lady, and went back to the Philippines. Tony traveled to Manila and was told to look for him at the Joint U.S. Military Assistance Group, JUSMAG, a military headquarters in nearby Quezon City. He tracked him down and invited him for lunch at the Manila Hotel together with his new wife. "Are you sure you can afford to treat us for lunch?" the young wife asked him. Tony ignored the insult. "I told Jerry my plan. I have the startup money but I do not have the brain," he said to massage the ego of his prospective business partner. Still, Lopez turned him down. "I am already happy here," he said. "I don't need a job." "Think about it overnight," Tony suggested, although he doubted whether the guy would change his mind. The lure of relaxing with his younger and prettier new wife versus the additional money he could earn from the offer might be stronger. "If you're not back with me in the plane bound for the U.S. by tomorrow, I will offer the job to somebody else," he said. The friend did not show his face at the airport, preferring to spend extra time in his matrimonial bed that morning. Tony then went to his second choice, Lieutenant Ramon Cordilla, supply officer, USN retired, not his real name. Ramon used to be with Tony at the Naval Air Station Miramar. He was then working for a civilian government contractor in San Diego. He too was not interested in Tony's offer. He was happy with his 40-hour-a-week job. His third interview was with another Filipino retired chief warrant officer of the Navy Supply Corps, Jose Marquez, not his real name, living in Chula Vista, California. When Tony looked for him in early 1991, he was told Marquez was in the Philippines attending his father's funeral. When he returned, he agreed to meet Tony at his beautiful home that sits on top of a hill. Tony met his wife Linda, who worked as a nurse at the VA hospital in La Jolla, California. His wife was suspicious, Tony recalled. "Ano, monkey business na naman yan, is that another monkey business?" she remarked when Tony and her husband met at their house. Tony surmised that Marquez must have ventured in other businesses that did not prosper before. That's why his wife was skeptical about the proposed deal. That same afternoon, Tony made him an offer. Since Marquez was a former contracting officer, Tony suggested that he be the company president. The two invested $15,000 each to create a startup fund with 50-50 equal partnership. They both agreed to use Tony's 4000 SF commercial building on Market Street in San Diego, California as the new firm's headquarters for free until the company made a profit. He also mentioned to Marquez that they didn't have to worry about rentals and future funds as they could borrow money from his physician wife, Priscilla. They drafted the Articles of Incorporation and both agreed on the company's name. They procured a business license and the necessary permits to conduct a logistics business and bought telephone and fax machines. Tony's plan was to win $1 million worth of contracts a year so that in 5 years, they would have $5 million in contracts to manage. From the profits, they would procure real estate assets. From these humble beginnings, the partners were eventually able to win over $1.5 billion worth of contracts. Because of the uncertainty of the venture in the beginning, Tony engaged in other side businesses like a restaurant and a travel agency. However, his concerns proved to be unfounded because eventually the company turned a profit. Their firm would bid for government projects that required their services, and most of the time, they won. My standard formula was to bid 10% lower than the budget for the job, he revealed. Because of our long-time experience with the Navy, we knew where to cut costs and make money. The business venture, which started with a small janitorial contract serving the border offices of the Immigration and Naturalization Services, eventually attained unprecedented growth that peaked with the U.S. Navy Inter-Service Supply Support Program, ISSOP, and employed over 1,600 personnel. At one time, the company was in several locations nationwide, including the U.S. Naval Station, Great Lakes, Illinois, managing over 50 facilities, maintaining inactive ships in reserve for the U.S. Navy, and doing construction works for the Department of Veteran Affairs in California and Hawaii. Sometimes we would open several contracts at the same time, Tony recalled. I would bring my own manager and hire people, but I don't hire troublemakers. Normally the contract is for 5 years. When it lapsed, we didn't rebid because it had become too competitive. He shepherded the company, constantly attaining success in all its projects. He and his company were endorsed by then-Congressman Bob Filner, CA 50 SUP or equals X/SUP District, to be selected for the Lifetime Achievement Award given by the Asian American Business Roundtable in November 2006 in Washington, D.C. Tony remembered an incident in their janitorial contract with the Border Patrol in San Diego. Since it was one of their first projects, he made sure everything was done correctly and right by assigning himself as the lead worker working with his crew and cleaning up the premises. He prepared a daily working schedule, bought all the cleaning supplies and material needs. Sometimes, he would show his crew how to clean the toilets himself. At the end of the first month's service, he looked for the head of the facility to hand him the first service invoice. He was led to the commanding officer, who recognized Tony. "Aren't you the one of the janitors cleaning toilets here?" "Yes," Tony replied and told him his name. "I am here to collect for our janitorial services rendered." "If I remember, Pizarro is the owner of the company," the officer noted. "Yes, that's me," Tony introduced himself. "I was here every day to make sure we do a good job." As he was walking out with the payment check, Tony whispered, "By the way, if you have any problems with my crew, please do not hesitate to give me a call." He then handed him his business card. The officer was surprised. "Congratulations," he said. "I admire you. You will go a long way." As the Filipino saying goes, the officer spoke with the tongue of an angel, nagdalang angel. His prophetic words came true as Tony Pizarro, the bold but humble entrepreneur, turned out to be an outstanding success.